Well, welcome everyone from my end to this rather late and last panel here in the Munich stage. So we'll end the day with sound innovation, and we'll be talking about the future of sound in the digital age. Thanks for the short introduction. We start the journey, I think, best in Berlin, where Matthias Schulz is based since, I think, 3 years already. But you're somewhat connected to your Bavarian roots thanks to a strong partnership with BMW Opera Next. So let's explore the future and get inspired, first of all, with the trailer taking us to the State Opera in Berlin.
Hallo, hier stehen wir alle bereit.
Immer bereit.
Worauf freust du dich in der kommenden Saison am meisten? Es ist einfach so ein ganz dichtes Erleben, wo man angefasst wird. Das finde ich einfach fantastisch.
Ja, I do believe in love at first sight.
Ich glaube nicht unbedingt an die Liebe auf den ersten Blick, aber ich glaube an das Verliebtsein auf den ersten Blick.
Matthias, maybe I take the trailer as a cliffhanger and use Mozart's Love at First Sight for my first question. You are not really a digital native, you're more what people call a digital immigrant. It must have been in the early stage of your work for Salzburg, for the Salzburg Festival, that really digital technology affected cultural management. Was it love at first sight, or did you kind of slowly get into it? Was it more or less a forced marriage? How did you and the digital world get together?
Yeah, first of all, I have the feeling with the art forms like opera, like classical music, it's of course a huge challenge to show and to make clear that this is an art form from today as well, and that we there's nothing better than to sit in an opera house, to be affected very immediately, to feel the instruments, to feel the voices, to feel the room in a way as well, the distances. Opera is a bit too much from everything, you know, the architecture, you have everything together. And to connect with the digital world is very important, to bring people to opera, to bring people in the concert houses, to present new perspectives. And that's what we try to do together with BMW and new projects to deliver this new perspectives.
Let us dig deeper in this not so easy situation, I think, for classical music and such an esteemed institution as an opera house, looking at the audiences and the variety of audiences you face, talking about the silver audiences and the new audiences you want to reach, and also looking at the general situation of how people perceive music or make use of music. So we have on the one side this omnipresence of music everywhere, so, you know, for some, it's probably no need to go to the opera. And for others, you know, these high-end devices bring new music in such an enormous, sensitive way to their ears that maybe also opera in all its analog format is not the place to be. What challenges do you face, and what's the strength of opera to pursue?
First of all, people think since 30, 40 years that the audience will just die. But we are very glad that this doesn't happen. It's very clear that in a special phase in your life, you don't have so much time for opera. But this is, there's a huge audience for that, and there's a huge potential for that. And I think especially in our times, people want these authentic experiences. Also when I worked still in Salzburg for the Mozarteum Foundation, for example, there were handwritings from Mozart. And if you stand in front of a handwriting, people get very emotional. And this being very emotional because of such a thing is interesting, because you can see everything on internet. Yeah, all the handwritings are there. You can have photographs of it, and so. But there's a difference to be in an opera house and to be in front of such things. And I think this desire will even increase. And there's even a chance for things like opera. For example, opera, of course, you need this kind of more attention span than 10 seconds. And I think people want to commit to something like that. And we need the digital communication to be part of the lives of the young people, to be part of different channels. But at the end, it should help to bring the people in the concert halls, in the opera houses. And opera is, a bit too much from everything, as I said. But insofar it's great that society has something like that. I always say a bit pathetic, a healthy society, or a society could evoke something like opera as a healthy society. And I think this is very important to see.
You're doing super well, I think, also thanks to this collaboration with BMW Opera Next, and of course being in Berlin, there is a big competition with a lot of other fields of culture and musical programs. So tell us a little bit more about how your vision to open up opera to new generations is also reflected in the program of the Berlin State Opera. Oops.
The program, it's very important to connect to new aesthetics. Also, for example, we have Barocktage, and the Barocktage is always 10 days in November. We invite orchestras with period instruments, and we had a project together with Olafur Eliasson, and he tried to use special costumes out of mirrors, which were more or less part of the set, and to bring music together with new aesthetics. Yeah, this is something which is very important, and you have to search for new solutions for that. It's also important from time to time to have new operas. Also, last year we had a new opera. It's called Violet Snow, and the interesting thing was we were together sitting with the director, with the composer, with the librettist, before any tone was written, and to discuss how opera should be in our times. This is also very important. It needs to kind of this innovation, this to be as a laboratory. And at the same time, if we have the big pieces from the past, from Verdi, from Mozart, and so forth, we have to make them, to refresh them in a good way. But I want to say at the same time, I get also, if you are there in a surrounding like in Berlin, you have also kind of, I think it's good to commit to opera like it is, and not to make everything open, because it's a great art form developed over centuries, and there's a reason why it is like it is. And this, to find the right balance there, this is the big challenge, of course.
Yeah, how do people react, especially to, because you mentioned Violetta Schnee, Violet Snow, to maybe to some not so known contemporary composers and in the field of opera? Are you happy with the response to this interesting program you do?
Yeah, also especially in performances like Violet Snow, we could see we have the opportunity to bring in even more young audiences, and this definitely happens. But it's not just the young audiences. It's there are some of the opera goers who it's like in a meal. They don't want just to have the main course, then they want also have different meal, and there are also the elder ones who are interested in that and want to be challenged. But you have to work on that. You have to communicate much more on these new things. You have to see what it is, and to make that emotional, it's important. And that's also why the digital forms of communication can help a lot to bring the right information about new pieces to the people.
Talking about digitalization in music, maybe some of you know that this year, 250 years after Beethoven's birth, I know he only did, I think, one opera, Fidelio, but never mind, you also do classical concerts, not only opera, I think. His unfinished Symphony No. 10 will be completed by AI. How do you look at this? Do you think this is like a petitesse, or do you think that's a noteworthy experiment? This is something to really go further and which you appreciate?
I mean, this happened quite often, that pieces who are fragment are completed by composers. There's also the big discussion. We will have a new Turandot in 22, because the planning is always very much forward. And there's always a big discussion about the ending and how the ending should be, and it's not written. You just have ideas from the composer, but you don't know what it really is. I think it's worth to do that.
You think a computer can replicate genius?
No, you mean that the computers are completing that? Yeah, this is something. I mean, it's worth to investigate, of course, and to find the results, and that machines are composing like Beethoven, like Mozart. But I'm absolutely sure that real genius in music or as a composer can just be found in human activities at the end. It's interesting to follow this thing, and you can use it in a lot of forms. But at the end, I'm sure real genius and real big masterworks can just come from the big composers.
Okay, so that's the answer to how opera will sound in the future. It'll still be mainly based on human genius and artists.
Yeah, it's important to use all the technology as much as you can to improve that. For example, when we have a turntable there and it's damaged, and in the meantime it's corrected by people sitting in Sweden by remote technology or things like that. Or we can include a very special video technology or into the aesthetics of an opera, or we can use the stage technologies. Really, everything is programmation, and this helps a lot. But at the end, opera should be an art form, where all the human imperfections can be brought into something even better. I have to say, it's a huge and a big discussion, of course, but technology has to help to bring people into opera, and that's what is also basic in our partnership with BMW.
Let's move to Henrik Schwarz, talking about technology and talking about perspectives, music and balancing between the classical canon and sounds of the digital era. That's the topic of your work as well. Being a musician, composer, music producer, and known for the eclectic approach to composition and sound design, and recently, or in the last years, also having extended your work towards orchestra and dance. Maybe we'll have the clip, the video, so we can see Henrik in his element, and then we start the discussion. Wow. So electronic music and highly charged dance sets at huge techno events seem kind of topical for our time. However, in your work, electronic and classical music in seated auditoriums, like in an opera, also interlace. What's the liaison for you as an artist of those two genres that is so inspiring, Henrik?
Well, I started working with acoustic musicians when I first played with Bugge Wesseltoft, who's a fantastic piano player, and he was so open to working with me with my laptop. So I got more confident that you could treat this computer thing as an instrument, and so from that first initial idea, it just developed. So I tried more and more things, and while I was doing all the techno stuff, there was also other things happening. So I started working with orchestras or string quartets, or tried music for ballet, and I found that there was a lot of potential for new things, because in the dance world, yeah, you have to deliver in a way,
So I guess asking you whether opera and contemporary sound somewhat contradict each other is more of a rhetorical question. But however, and that's linking back to the discussion with Matthias, there are reasons that especially the younger generation rate opera as old-fashioned, maybe as outdated. What, in your eyes, led to the image, and how is your understanding of the role canonized classical music and opera can and should play today in today's society?
Well, I think what happened is maybe after World War II, there was a lot very radical new music written, and this music was great, but it more and more went away from the audience, or it was more and more difficult to understand what these people were doing, and I think they kind of lost the audience on the way. So, for example, when you listen to contemporary stuff that is written today, it's very often very difficult to understand and enjoy. So I was spending years to get behind what they were doing because I was interested, but I'm interested in music, so I do that as a job. But what would you expect from people who don't do that? So I think, yeah, we have lost like a big part of the audience on the way, so when there's new stuff in the opera house today, there's a lot where it's old, fantastic music combined with new visuals or technical ideas, but still the music is old. It's not bad, but it's old, and I believe there should be more new stuff going on that is also accessible. That is not. That doesn't mean it's flat or anything, because that's what I know from the electronic world. That's something I learned on the way, because I was listening to a lot of so-called new music, and when they step into trying out electronic things, that's stuff I understand. And I was listening to what they were doing, and they had big discussions about a 3-minute piece, and I thought, yeah, but this is something we, from the electronic perspective, we have done that before, and we put it in context. So I got more confident in how I would see that, and so I think, yeah, there's just a lot of new ideas that can be accessible, and I think if there would be new music, then there would be more audience.
Well, I mean, I think from looking at the program of the Berlin State Opera and from listening to you, there are many aspects where new impulses, new visions, new ways to approach classical themes are part of what is happening there. I would again like to ask you from your background, I mean, aside from the fact that you wish there were even more innovative aspects in opera, as an art form, opera is very much probably opposed to, you know, the fast way of living, perceiving music, using music, going to parties, leaving. It's a very stable, like lasting frame people have to consciously enter, willingly enter. From your eyes, what's the surplus of this art form, opera?
Well, I think, especially in recent years, I've seen there's a lot happening. Like classical venues, they are opening their doors. That's what I definitely can say. There's a lot going on, and I wish there's even more going on. I lost my point.
I was really asking on opera, what the
why is it relevant?
of
yes,
opera means
I think
for
it
you.
is absolutely relevant because it's, from my perspective, it's the exact opposite of what is going on a smartphone. So it's on a smartphone. It's small. It's only like 20 seconds long. It doesn't cost much because it's usually user-driven. So you look at that, and then you take the next one, the next one, the next one, and that's okay, and it can be very inspiring. And then you have this other thing on the other end, and for me this is opera in a way because it's a huge production. There's many things and people involved. There's technology involved. All the arts are involved, and I think that's where the huge potential is, because this is something I see that we don't take time anymore to build ideas. So there's no time to discuss with an architect or a painter, or there's not much time to discuss ideas. You usually do something, you throw it out there, and immediately you get likes or you don't get likes. And what I also think is that, like all the algorithms out there, they hype the mediocre stuff. So it's that stuff gets pushed that many people like, and so it's not always the stuff that I think is maybe relevant, or it's. I mean, I can understand because it has to work within a few seconds, and opera has the chance to build the other side, or just make a relevant point. You know.
Talking about clicks and slowing down and this happening in the opera, how do you see the perspective opera can the perspective digitalization can do for opera? How do you, because you kind of separated both opera being on the other end of the line, but then how can they really work together in your eyes?
No, I wouldn't say that means opera should stay away from all technology or everything digital. Just the opposite. I think it's, for me, coding also is an art form, because it can be very creative, and it's technology. Yeah. And so technology plays a role in opera, and it can be free from the need of making money, for example. So this is something you can make. You can work, and you can work in a very abstract way, and then you work with other arts. So you work with music, and that's where it can be a place where all the arts come together.
Matthias, you want to add something? I see you.
They said something which is really important, that opera needs time. Yeah. To go in opera, you need a lot of attention. You have to commit to something. You have to accept that a line of the human voice needs possibly needs his time. You have to breathe, and this is very to the opposite of something which is happening in our daily lives. But this is also at the same time the big chance of it. And I think we have not to say this against the other. The digital world can help, as we said already, but to be in an opera house, like in the Berlin Staatsoper, we have just 1,400 seats. It has the same measurements than 275 years ago. It's just 1,300 seats. It's a very direct way of experience opera. There is a choir on stage. There's a huge orchestra. It's completely anachronistic in a way because there are so many people. It's not efficient in a way. and it doesn't possibly need to be efficient. Of course, we have to be efficient from an economic side in another field, but what happens on stage is not efficient. And it's not necessary to be that. It has to show something different. It needs, and it's really and completely something different to the daily life. And this is great, and you need to take time.
Let's probably get back to this after talking to Renzo, Vitale, and maybe then later also you have, I invite you to include your questions in our talk. But talking about the big space of opera, we should now get into the rather small space of a car and talk about how we will soon be driven by completely new sound systems and talk about the role of sound will play in designing the role sound will play in designing electric vehicles for the future. Renzo, you are, as Henrik and Matthias, you are many in terms of expertise. You're also a musician, you're an artist, and all of this kind of fuels your work for the Research and Innovation Center of the BMW Group, where you work as a noise and vibration and harshness engineer, a sound and acoustic designer. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges and visions which link to your work? As we've been talking about the power of opera, we've been talking about the relevance of the classical repertoire and ways to open both of them to a new generation. So
sure.
Working for a big brand as BMW, I think you also face challenges, and you're fueled with visions. Please share your thoughts.
Absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the beautiful ideas that you were sharing. I could relate so much on what you were saying about the perception of opera from the point of view of an audience, this concept of taking time, of understanding, of breathing, is something that is essential in music. And also, I was relating to what Eric was saying about how the perception of music over the years has changed, and how this intellectual approach of music has lost people. And one idea, as I was thinking, related to what I do, which is designing the sound for electric vehicles for our cities, it's the topic of scale. And scale, it means in terms of space. You have a stage, as Matthias was saying, there just fit 1,400 people within there. You have a car, which is a small scale. It's 4 people, 5 people. But you have the scale of the city. So if you look at the car as one entity within and millions of entities going around, then the scale changes. And these are the things with which I am constantly confronted when I'm composing sound, because it's a responsibility towards those who are outside, but also an opportunity for those who are inside. And that brings me to the concept of narrative as well, which is very close to opera. At the end of the day, opera is nothing else than expressing different emotions. That's how I was born. I mean, I'm Italian. Opera was born in Italy 400 years ago. And in fact, it is interesting how everything started from people that were singing this art form, madrigale, and then they started to conceive this recitar cantando. That's what it was called back then. So it's expanding the way music can reach people. Talking about emotions in Italy and the heritage and the traditions we all have and love, but what is the sound for the machines of the future, for cars inspired, and how do you navigate between the auditory heritage there is and also the effects of our times producing not only new sounds but also new auditory habits and conditions? How do you navigate? I mean, the challenge is huge because it's about composing something that didn't exist before. I mean, electric vehicles, the first experiments went back to the, I think, 1840, 50. But the idea of giving them a voice has only become relevant in the past few years as they were introduced in the cities, and then it was realized that they could be dangerous, so they need sound. And now the first approach was, in general, to create this noise, that's how it was called, or warning system, but then that's where I interpret this in a different way. And being a musician, being a performer, I have something that I can show also for talking about closer this concept. The first thing that I thought when I saw a car, I don't know if you can switch to the... Yes. Yeah. So, for instance, when I'm standing in front of this object, I see it an highly intelligent performance art installation. This is a piece of art. And being at BMW since a couple of years, I know what does it mean to create this, and it's extremely complicated. So what I see are the people there behind, and there comes the human factor. So what I try to do when I compose new sound is just to transmit how much humans are behind this object. Because at the end, this goes back to us, human. And I would like to find a way to translate this. So going back to your question, how do you do this? For this car, for instance, I want to show just an approach on how I did it. I start for something that moves me. I don't know how about Henrik when he conceives a new piece. Sometimes it's improvisation, but sometimes it's emotion. And this is an installation by James Turrell, which I'd experienced some time ago, and it was really miraculous. And so I thought, is there a way to translate this visual perception to a sound perception?
That's something that links, among others, Matthias and Renzo, that also, besides working with Turrell or being inspired by the work, Olaf Eliasson is a shared love in the work you do.
It's interesting that you are mentioning this, because actually there is one very sound that I have composed with, I don't know if you know that since last year we are cooperating with Hans Zimmer, and the very first sound that we composed together, it's called a start-stop sound, because when you have an electric car and you start the car, you don't listen to anything. It's silence, which is beautiful, of course. Mm-hmm. And I also want to say that we are working very hard to make the best silence in the car. But you know, whenever you want to express yourself, that's where sound is important. And in this case, I have also, I didn't know you were mentioning this, but there is, I can show you this right away. This start-stop sound was actually inspired by this piece of art from Olaf Eliasson. This is in Lembachhaus.
In Munich.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And Olaf Eliasson has been also cooperating with BMW, because BMW is involved with culture since 50 years. We've done lots of cooperations. And so I like the idea to bring art in the work. And just to see, how do you translate...
While we're promoting BMW, I would also like to promote the Lembachhaus, and maybe you have some time during your stay in Munich, or the Munichers, of course, know it, and visit this amazing work of Olaf Eliasson at the museum here in Munich.
I just wanted to show an example how you can one possibility of translating this into sound. So the idea, you see this gesture of this element. We start from a point and it opens up. So what me and Hans did, we used female voices, and we started from a tone that was opening when you were pressing on the button. And at the same time, this work is done with lots of glass. So we started playing with glass elements on guitars and generating sounds. So it just served as an inspiration for reaching things that otherwise maybe we wouldn't have done. And I can play you this sound for you even. It's a short sound, so the scale is very small. Mm-hmm. Again, the topic of scale. But in these 3 seconds, you have to understand the car is on. I can drive, but everything is fine. In a winter day, in the morning, you start the car, and the car is saying, "Don't worry, it's going to be a wonderful day." And so this is also the things that I have to relate to. On one side, there is the information that the sound has to convey, and on the other side, there is the emotions.
you've been talking about the inside of the car, and I think we're curious to hear also the sound of the future when it comes to the outside of a car moving through urban space. Do you have some examples for us?
Yes, I have something I can show you. So I have one sound that I've done with Hans as well, which is the sound for this car. So I was talking with you about the exterior world and the interior world. And here outside there are a few BMWs, so if you have the opportunity, just listen to this car as they are standing or driving, because they already have a new sound that I've composed. And now I want to show you a clip where you would perceive the sound of the electric part of this car as you would be driving.
Wow, this sounds super futuristic to me, and really far away from the link of engine sound and velocity and a lion groaning in the street, something that I believe probably a lot of the clients of BMW appreciate when...
We'll see. I mean, there are several ideas that we are working on, and it's not only about power. Sometimes you want to express power, and you have to have the opportunity to do so. But sometimes you want to express something different, maybe. And we are working on giving the driver, which we interpret as a performer, the opportunity to express himself according to how he's feeling. And if he doesn't want to have pure silence, there it is. We talk about it as an aesthetic silence. This is also the added value that electric cars, electric mobility is bringing. So it's not that sound has to be everywhere. It has to be there when you want it.
How much will we be able to make our own sounds in cars with the cars? How DIY is the future of sound when it comes to electric cars?
Well, I mean, I have a clear idea on this. When you're buying a car or an object, you buy it because you like it, but do you buy it also because of what it represents? And many people are related to BMW for what it represents also in terms of story and for what we are able to express with this car. And so if everyone would add his own sound to this car, there is the danger that this doesn't speak about this entity any longer. So what we want to do with the future is giving opportunities, giving a choice within elements that still speak about our history, our design, our identity.
And this leads me to the question, how much you working for a global brand as BMW, how much the various different auditory cultures are relevant for the work you do?
This is extremely relevant. I mean, I go again to the concept of scale. We produce millions of cars a year, and millions of cars are injected in the worldwide, and everyone has a different sensibility. And we do listen to the opinion of different people coming from different countries to see how they react. And we know that, for instance, in Asia, they have a different way to judge specific sounds. We listen, we process, but then we give our interpretation of all of this. For what I said before, because at the end, people in Australia, in China, in the US, they end up falling in love with this product, with what it represents. So we believe, at least, that what we are offering is something they could relate with.
I think this is super interesting, the different cultures and how this will all probably be globalized in one sound of a car or this.
I liked very much what Henrik said before when he said the small scale and then the larger scale of the people that you putting lots of effort to make this accessible, which is, I think, it's a wonderful thing, the way you're doing. And in a similar way, it's the struggle and the opportunity that I have at the same time, because you want to be specific and do something that you love, but at the same time, you want also to embrace a wider audience. So it's very subtle balance to deal with.
So maybe last question, and then maybe you have some questions, and I guess it's also already time to kind of wrap up. This sound we heard is the one of the BMW Vision X, right? So
this is a sound that we designed for this prototype car, and is specifically thought for the experience of this vehicle. So,
from where will the journey take us? How will the sound be in, let's say, 10 years from now?
I cannot tell you everything because there are some secrets, of course, that I have to keep. But what I can tell you that it's not going to be boring.
It's not. Sorry?
It's not going to be boring.
It's not going to. That's for sure. That's for sure. Well, I hope it wasn't boring for you, and maybe you have some questions to. Yes, please. Don't know whether we have a microphone.
So I can let me reverse the question. And this goes to Henrik and then Renzo as well. Talk about sound, but there's so much sound pollution from this. Every single machine beeps, mobile phone beeps. How do you actually see creation of sound spaces around sound pollution, in case of electronic music? So how do you see, or how do you address personally sound pollution? You know, is music going to, and electronic music going to address this in some kinds of forms in the future? And then also for Renzo, we have so much sound around us. How can we still enjoy sound in the future without the sound? Well, I think that you have to make a separation between what is actually a useless sound and what is a sound that inspires you. Because for me, music in general, but it can also be a sound, because if a sound is very complex and it's telling you many things, then it's in a way like music, even if it's very short. But if that's a sound that inspires you to do something or changes your brain in any kind of way, because that's the reason why I listen to music, then it's a good sound. Everything else is noise, and that's how I see it. Yeah.
Maybe I can add something to what Eric said. I mean, the problem of noise pollution, of course, is a serious topic that in past few years has been already addressed with, there are more and more devices that they use active noise cancellation. So they help people at least to reduce the unwanted noise, because it's about this. It's about what is wanted and what is unwanted. And if you are, I think when I'm walking in a park, you walk there, you have the trees, you have birds, you have fountains, and there are lots of sonic informations there. They are given. You cannot choose. Is this noise, or is this something that you want to hear? And this is the idea that I always have when I'm designing sound for electric car. I always think I'm injecting a sound, not a noise, in the cities. How much can this sound be capable to be part of the environment? And the aspect of noise also, I was recently reading a book where they were mentioning that in I think 1903 they funded the first society for the suppression of our necessary noise. How beautiful this! This was in New York time, more than 100 years ago. And so the problem, it's not a problem of today, but as I was reading on this book, they were saying that they were complaining because the clip-clop of horses on the pavement was much louder of the first cars going around the cities. And so what are you going to do? What are you going to say to a horse? Don't walk? And so there is always a balance between what is needed and what is unwanted. You're welcome.
More questions from you, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question about you talked about the localization of the sounds and talking about different regions. So is that just to clear it up? Is that to say, since you have a global product, do you use that localization information for, say, launching a car in North America versus in Singapore, or is it a global sound?
It's a good question. So basically, the car is the same worldwide when you see it from outside. And we've discussed a lot about this, but ultimately the concept is that this sound is the voice of this car. So we have to find something that identifies us with the sound, where we are sure enough to say, no matter where this car is landing, this car, the sound will be the same. There are however, some differences that are related to the regulations. For instance, in US, the regulations for the sound from outside, they go up to 30 kilometers per hour, and they address other regions of the spectrum of a sound. And this is very tricky, because you have to add some components that might be more disturbing, which we don't want to. At the end, we want to make a very good sound that doesn't disturb you, because we don't want to introduce pollution, but it informs you at the same way. And so this threshold between how different are the sound between the Europe legislation and the US, it's very subtle, but we try to do something that it's almost identical.
Yeah.
Question for Renzo, and first of all, maybe Henrik can confirm the idea. So if you would play a set and you have a massive crowd and it starts raining, the first raindrop drops, maybe you want to have a different beat drop and you want to react because the audience is in the rain. When is a car going to do that, Renzo? When does it really adapt to the environmental changes? And if you take it at a global level, a car in Mumbai when it rains, might not sound the same or should not sound the same like a car in Rome when the sun is shining.
It's a very good question. Thank you for asking this. The concept of adaptivity, it's in our daily process of development. Again, there are things that I cannot say here, unfortunately, but I can tell you that we are very conscious about this, about the opportunity that this offers. Because we see all the information in the surrounding as an opportunity of interaction. And first of all, with sound, I mean, when you see rain, it's a world that opens, which could be, in terms of safety, even dangerous, because the rain could mask the sound of the electric cars, and then you don't listen to it any longer. And it's a serious problem. But at the same time, it's a dialogue. And what we would like the car to do is to be able to dialogue, first with the driver and at the same time with the environment. So yeah, we are on that.
I just would like to say something on this. Before, if you have a noise everywhere, yeah? Today in the elevator I was there and was a great piece of piano music. And sometimes it's great to have sounds who help to create emotions or to help to get other emotions. But if you have these great pieces and you just hear that aside, so then you do nothing in a way, because you cannot hear to that with concentration, and at the end you do nothing. And I think a car is a great room to hear very concentrated. I think that is possible. Yeah? And for classical music, you have always the problem that the music is not presented in a way two-dimensional when you hear it. Because when you are in a concert hall and there's a big orchestra and there are the double basses on the very left side, and you have harps, for example, on the right side, and kind of it's important that you can hear where the instruments are. and at the same time you get a good mixture of it. But I think a car could do that and can even improve to have these 3 dimensions in a way. And I'm sure Renzo is working on that.
Yes,
I think we'll have to wrap up. Thank you all very much for the perspectives on opera of the future, on the visionary approaches towards music and sound for electric cars. Maybe very last question to all 3 of you. Looking ahead, what will be the worst sound of the future?
Shall I start? In a way, it's silence. Silence can be the most beautiful thing in a way, but it can be the most frightening at the same time. And Renzo said it before. If you have silence in a car, there's a kind of sound, but totally silence, I think it's awful.
Silence is a super interesting issue, which fills another hour, I think. But Henrik, the worst sound of the future.
Well, I want to say something else, but from what you said, I was just thinking, in music we had what we call the loudness war. So that was a system where all music producers were trying to get their music as compressed as possible for radio, because every human being, the louder the music is, the better it feels for you. So when there's a piece on the radio that is louder than the other piece, you would say, the louder one is better. So I just got the feeling that if there is all these electric cars going on the road, and I'm pretty sure that all the brands will try to make their cars recognizable as much as possible. So I'm fearing there might be a war of electric car sounds. And because you're trying to break through, and I understand it from a brand message, of course, but
there are laws,
I'm pretty sure
however.
there will be a regulation pretty soon.
Yeah, I can reassure you, because there are the regulation outside. They move on 2 levels. The one is how quietest has to be a car. And a silenced car is too quiet for the regulation, so you have to have a minimum of sound, but at the same time you have the over threshold. Yeah. So you cannot go over a specific dB level. So it's not going to be possible to be, which I'm very happy of. For instance, what you've heard here of the car, it's what the driver would perceive, but it's not what we are injecting in the cities. If you would listen to the electric cars outside, just put attention,
now, I think,
and it's very
just believe
smooth.
that there will be someone who, because then a higher frequency can be much louder than a lower frequency. Because I was very interested what you said about the frequencies. So because if you have only high frequencies, you can make them really loud without the system measuring a high level. So there's tricks, because we've done it.
It will be vibrating.
And
Renzo.
I think that it will happen. I'm pretty sure it will happen.
But how about composing a piece for a neighborhood?
What do you mean?
You take the cars in a neighborhood and then use them
they
to
all play
compose
together.
music.
Yes.
That's how I think of it.
We just have a nice chord when
Maybe next
BMW
project.
is leaving. Yeah, that's good.
The visionary of sound on the worst sound of the future. Renzo.
I would say, as you're thinking, you used the word war, and I think this is a sound that I don't want to experience. So weapon to me would be the worst sound ever.
Beautiful last sentence. Thank you all for being with us, joining the discussion, and enjoy the next hours of this remaining day and the DLD program, and see you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.